and I saw it as an entire picture of, yes, that is a possible solution that would actually be comprehensive to all the things that I want to help resolve as an activist. Because I was already an activist. I mean, I was somebody who was outspoken about injustice. I'm just that type of person. But to have things come together in a view, which is immediately also why I began doubting it as soon as that happened, because it was so rare, so unique, and I'm also aware that there are a lot of things that are pitched as the answer that aren't, and that it immediately made me suspicious, and I wanted to know, who Jacques Fresco was, and if there could be a way that there was something that could be manipulated with these ideas. But really, there are all these things that come up when you're hit with something so different than your worldview that you almost want to find an excuse that that negates it, just so, because there's a stress involved with the processing of the information.
Absolutely. It is, it's almost like, our cognitive defenses do go up, and we fight to try and deny it to begin with. And if the person is a very critically thinking individual to begin with, they won't settle for that base mere denial. They will try and find justifications for that. So they're like, I'll show them, I'll find out. I mean, even in a sense, even though the whole thing is one big practice of confirmation bias, it in a sense turns itself on its head, because the more evidence you uncover, the more research you do, the more validation for the train of thought you find. So it's eventually just seduces you in a sense.
Yeah.
You just have to say, well, I've tried to debunk it. I can't. I will
Right.
I will keep trying. I will call out any illogical statements that I find, just so I can, maintain that critical thinking. But then, wait a minute, the train of thought is calling for critical thinking as well. This is making more and more sense.
Exactly.
And you just can't fight.
Well, I definitely think, that punch in the stomach is sort of that visceral cognitive dissonance that happens when you realize that the way that you have been viewing the world, or the way that you've been taught about the world, even if you're suspicious of things not being true, but there are many things that we sort of just accepted as what is, that then you realize, oh, this is something that can be changed and altered, and you start to see it as being a box in and of itself, the structure, the monetary system, for one, and it's nobody likes to be wrong, and we all have an identity with our culture, with our way of thinking, or it affects how we evaluate making any decision that we make. Is based on our worldview, and we have these strong identifications with our worldview a lot of times, that when someone is pointing out where that's wrong, it's almost something that affects you as if it's affecting your identity, because it is. We sort of have merged those in so many ways. There's that cognitive dissonance that happens, but two, definitely, as you mentioned, because the part of this package is critical thinking and does encourage you to challenge the information, it's really hard to say this is a manipulation, because it challenges you to prove it wrong. Mm-hmm. And I came to sort of weigh, and I think a lot of people do who come to the movement, to sort of think, okay, well, it doesn't, on one hand, on one hand, it seems very comfortable to feel validated that you knew something was wrong, okay, that you knew that things weren't right, and that we needed real change, and that it wasn't just you being crazy, thinking that you're an oddball, having different thoughts than mainstream. So there's a comfort in that, but then there's also a discomfort in knowing that, okay, with this new information, it's so different, it's so out of the box, that if you're going to go presenting it to people, you already know in advance there's going to be a resistance to the information. So you want to be really solid in, okay, I want to be sure that this is something I want to put my name on or attach
Mm.
um,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
an
that's
association to. It's sort of that moment where you have to get real with, okay, if the closest thing to truth, not necessarily absolute truth, but like knowledge, is what you're after, then this is the route that you want to go. There's being comfortable, and then there's actually evaluating things, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and I had to sort of embrace that, which wasn't a huge step for me because I part of an identity that already existed for me as a human being was is that I had for a long time identified with being somebody who kind of marches to the beat of a different drummer. So from
mm,
that standpoint, I wasn't affected by, oh, people might not like me, or I might not be popular to have this view. But I knew that I have a lot of people that I respect that are skeptical and that do challenge things, and I wanted to be able to present something confidently that could withstand that. And I did get to a point where I had worked through all. I was a really harsh critic of the movement ideas being presented. Even as I was learning about it and saying, yeah, this is great and wanting to talk about it, I was critiquing it. I was saying, what about this? You know, what about a power structure that could be within that? What about this may resemble too much having an intellectual elite emerge and have it be a different kind of stratification? What about that? You know, I started to evaluate things that way. What about biodiversity if you have a unified system? You know, those kinds of questions were things that were entering my mind about it. And then as I would be answering those for myself, it would still really just get down to this is what we need to be talking about. This is what we need to be promoting. If anybody can grasp it at any level, it can save our species. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I found that when I first encountered the train of thought, I mean, I do admit that did go off on a sort of kind of an extremist bent. Well, not an extreme, fanatic bent, on it, where, I actually, because I mean, recently I was listening to one of your presentations, I think communicating RBE concepts, and you give an example of a hypothetical Facebook status that someone put saying, wake up, you ignorant sheeples, before we all
right,
die. I
right,
every time I hear that, I think to myself, that's kind of like what the kind of stuff I would say, like before I sort of identified with the movement, and maybe a little bit after, because it's like a huge shock to the system, and you just get energized with all this motivation because of the knowledge
right,
that you have accrued, even though you're you're being self-critical and critical of the train of thought. There's that sort of, okay, what's the catch with this train of thought sort of things? And it can be exhausting, I think, to a lot of people. I mean, I actually, I admire anyone who can maintain a level of, of sanity when, dealing with this kind of information, especially if, because thing is, before I came to the movement, I mean, one of the things that actually turned me on to seeing Zeitgeist was I was in a big obsessive phase with conspiracy theories. And the thing is, I could watch hours and hours and hours of documentaries about conspiracy theories, and supposedly unmasking all these really nefarious things that, the New World Order are coming to get you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That would just completely wash over my eyes virtually. I'd be fine with that. But when I realised that the very inherent logic of the system itself
right.
is cancerous, and something can be done about it, and we could have done that decades ago. That really hit. It's really strange how a lot of people think that, it's the conspiracy theories that pose quite a threat to someone's psychology, when in fact, because with most conspiracy theories, you can either brush them off, or if some of them are shown to have empirical evidence in there, it doesn't really affect things much, because it's like, yeah, so what? I mean, that's what the system rewards. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we kind of accept that. But when we actually realise that it's not about bad people, it's about the very environment itself creating those tendencies in people. That's when I sort of went, and I've been born into this system at this point. Why? It's like, why has things been allowed to get so bad? And I completely agree with what you say. It is a hard thing to suddenly know, and I think that's a lot why like small chapters, like say for example my chapter in Maidstone, I haven't really been doing much of the small scale events or anything. I did a Z-Day event and a couple of like informal meetups, but I haven't been doing much with that lately. So I kind of keep thinking that the chapter's going to start stagnating, because every now and then people come to the Facebook group for the chapter and say, oh yeah, this sounds really cool, I'd really like to get involved. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's brilliant, man. So, we're going to be arranging a meet up in, say, a couple of weeks, and, it's hard to sort of keep that momentum up. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the global radio show podcast that yourself does, that Jason does, Brandon does, and some of the guys in the Canadian chapters do, it's all focused on, maintaining that integrity as chapter structures and strategies for, keeping things together and not letting it atrophy. I just find that fantastic, because, it is a chapter-based movement. So if our chapters suck, then we're not going to really go very far, are we?
Well, the interesting thing about how the Zeitgeist movement is structured is that, I don't know if you remember in the earlier days when Peter was talking about things that inspired him in structure, and one of them was Wikipedia. And mostly because it's a sort of a self-evolving thing as far as information is populated by it's user-generated and user-edited. And he wanted something like that in the form of the movement for activism and having people create content and share content, and in a networked way. I was very inspired by that, because I think Wikipedia is a great project. I know there's some stuff that is very useful and is probably pretty accurate, and then there's some stuff that needs some probably finessing and attention to be more accurate. So that's what happens when you open something up, is you get a little bit of everything, but it's constantly evolving and sort of self-correcting through the users. And in that same way, the Zeitgeist movement does follow a similar pattern to Wikipedia, in that if you look statistically at the percentage of people who, and I remind coordinators of this too, because they get very frustrated. Well, let me back up a little bit. They get very frustrated because a lot of the expectation is, I'm going to create a chapter and I'm going to grow it, and then we're going to have all these people coming to meet, and we're going to get so big we're going to break into other chapters, and we're going to have so many volunteers, and everybody who comes in is going to lend their skills, and they think about it as an equal distribution of labor. That's kind
Yeah.
of the thought that if, oh, it's open and everybody wants to volunteer, there'll be sort of an equal